is so good is I used to live here in Stuttgart. That's why I know some Deutsch. But well, I come from Argentina actually. I'm a Microsoft MVP nowadays, which was announced like a month ago. But all of this is because of my work and my contributions to MvvmCross. So in Argentina, I have a startup which is called Dichenix, and I work as a mobile lead on it. And well, I've been coding for Xamarin for like 4 years now, maybe 5. And yeah, I just like it, and I hope you like it as well, and the same for MvvmCross. So I'd like to ask you if who of you works on Xamarin or is a Xamarin developer. Can you please raise your hands? Okay, so not so many.
Yeah, I do.
And who of you knows MvvmCross? Who of you already knows it? Okay, so that's good. We'll make it very, very interesting introduction. And the last one is, do you happen to use any other framework which competes with MvvmCross, like Prism or, I don't know, MVVM Lite maybe, or any other? Or have you used it in the past, maybe for WPF or UWP? Yes, one?
MVVM Lite.
Okay, MVVM Lite. And what was it? Prism? Okay, that's great. So, let's start by reviewing a little bit of the agenda today. I start by making a short recap of the MVVM pattern. I guess most of you already heard of it or already use it, but just in case. Then I'll try to answer the question of why would you use an open source framework, why you should rely on something like that. Then, well, MvvmCross, what we are here to talk about. Then I explain which are the goodies or which are the features it provides you with. And I'll do some demos in the meantime. And I'd like to ask you if you could please, or just don't hesitate to interrupt me if you have any question while I'm doing a demo or showing some code, because, well, it's a meetup and it's not a conference, so it's good if we are that close. And, well, yeah, I have to receive any question while the presentation. And there will be a question and answers as well to the end. So, this is the MVVM pattern. This was invented by Microsoft, or not really by Microsoft, but in Microsoft back in 2005. So it's a pattern which has been around for like 13 years now, which makes it kind of old, but it's still sexy, I'd say. So this is what Microsoft says in their own site. So in the MVVM pattern, there are 2 components, which are the view model, and the model. So these highly decoupled and very easy to differentiate components interact with each other. The view is basically what the user sees, what the user interacts with, what the user touches, or what the user, just interacts with. While the view model is an abstraction layer of that view. So how this pattern came out is, it was like, okay, we have SAML and we have code behind, but the code behind has become a mess because it has not only event handlers and methods, but also state. So Microsoft wanted to get rid of all that code behind, and they come up with this solution of making an abstraction layer, which they call view model. So it's basically that. And the advantage of it, that it wasn't direct from the beginning, is that if you are coding for more than just one platform, suppose 2 or 3, then as a result, you can just reuse the entire view model and just add any view. That was really crazy, and that's still crazy. You can reuse a huge amount of code with that. And then there's the model. So the model is just business logic and business object, just the domain of the application, which has state, of course. So the view interacts with the view model through data binding and commanding. Then the view model interacts the same way, but the model fires changes each time something changed on it, and it is updated by the view model when state occurs or where something like a command is triggered. Okay? So, let's move on to the MVVM benefits, or why should you use MVVM. It leads to highly decoupled components. So, as we have seen before, these three layers are for the main two layers, which are view and view model. They are very, very clean, and there's no way you can confuse them. So this leads to much, much cleaner code. As I mentioned before, you can share so much code if you're making an app for more than one platform that it makes it really, really interesting. And the fact is, even on view models, you can share code through inheritance or any other pattern or strategy, because apps have lists, right? Apps have forms, and all of those are very, very common. So you can just say, okay, this view model will be my base view model for lists, this one will be my base view model for forms, and so it goes. Then it's a highly scalable pattern, because as we have seen, we spoke about one view model, we spoke about one view, but this scales up really quickly and really easy. If you need a new screen on your app, if you need a new feature on it, well, just create a new model, just create a new view. It's as easy as that, and it's as clean as that. There's no way you can do it wrong if you use MVVM. So it's really easy to understand and to use by new developers as well. The learning curve is not so bad. So this leads to working in parallel as something made easy. One person can work on a view model while the other person works on a view platform, on the SDK of Android, for instance, while another person is working on iOS, and all of this can happen in parallel without any merge conflict. That's good, isn't it? And of course, as it has been around for 15 years, it has been revamped, it has been redesigned at some point, but it's still hot, and it's, well, production ready. So, we have decided to use MVVM because, well, I convinced you, and now I'll try to convince you of using an open source framework. So, why would you do that? Well, if you think about it, when you're using sort of a framework for any kind of app, it doesn't matter that if it's for Xamarin, but if it's MVVM, but it's just a framework, well, you're getting rid of abstraction discussions on your team or your development team. Of course, you're taking an opinionated framework, so you can either like those abstractions ready and there for you, or you can dislike them, but you don't have to discuss about them. And if you think about it, then at the end of the day, you're developing an app. You're not really concerned about how should a data binding engine work, or how should the inverse of control container work. You're just concerned about features that you should add to your app. So you're free about all those kind of discussions. Other than that, there are so much less barriers for new developers that it makes scaling the teams so much easier. I myself once needed to take over an app that didn't use any sort of framework or anything like that, and it was developed for 2 years maybe by a team. And it was really, really hard for me because I needed to get used to the code, and it was such a large code base that I needed like, 2 weeks to make my first commit, because of course it had troubles, so it wasn't that easy. But well, using something that is open, that is available on the net, that is open, well, makes barriers so much easier to get over. Suppose you open a new position at your company, and if you say, hey, if you know MvvmCross, or it happens with all frameworks, like if you know Angular, well, the team, if the app uses Angular, well, the team will scale so much easier, right? Then, as I mentioned before, You can just focus on requirements, on what matters, on what really, really matters. And this also saves time, because if, if I'm working on an app, and this app, of course, uses MvvmCross, but there's a person who raises an issue on the framework, on the repository, and he says, hey, this is failing, this will break for everyone. Then I say, oh, okay, can I fix it? Maybe that person fixed it, and I didn't even need to work on it, and I got it for free, that fixed for free. So that's how it goes with open source. It's a community of developers working on a community product, which is for the community once again. So it saves time for your company. And that's why, well, open source people, we tend to ask to contribute back, but the reason is there's so much time. Suppose MvvmCross has like 7,000 commits, which you don't need to pay for, of course. So that's how it goes with open source. And the last one is, of course, that if you're working on a team and that team is localized in the same office, well, when working in open source, you get contributions, you get insights, you get inputs from any developers in the world. I'm from Argentina, like a crazy country to be a developer, right? It's not very common. Well, I maintain that framework, and I can give inputs from another culture, from another point of view, and that's once again for free for the framework. And that's what I like most about working on open source. You get to know so many ways of coding, so many ways to do things that, well, I highly recommend that. So MvvmCross, this is our logo. Do you know it? Okay. So what we say MvvmCross is about, or which our goal is to do app development without compromise. So we want it to be flexible more than everything. We don't want it to put any limitation to the platform. We want it to be a framework that helps you build apps without any kind of compromise. So, which platforms does MvvmCross support? Xamarin Android, Xamarin iOS, Mac, tvOS, UWP, WBF, console, Tizen, well, console, because why not? Tizen is a work in progress right now, we are working on it. But the last one, which is the most important, is Xamarin.Forms. This is crazy, because Xamarin.Forms is actually based on Xamarin Android, Xamarin iOS, UWP, but well, MvvmCross supports Xamarin.Forms as a platform. So this is important because suppose you're developing a new app, and this app needs to be on the market, or it needs to be done really fast, like a prototype. So you can prototype it on Xamarin.Forms. You can use different layers for the core layer and for the SAML files. But then, when the app becomes really big, or when you need to use something provided by an SDK that you cannot use with Xamarin.Forms, or it just becomes a mess, well, you can drop all your code you have for Xamarin.Forms and do a Xamarin Android app. So you can reuse 100% of the code you made for the core layer, okay? Or let's say you are using Xamarin.Forms because it makes sense, and then you are doing your app for Xamarin Android and for Xamarin iOS through Xamarin.Forms, okay? But then you need to cover UWP, and in the past, not really now, but in the past, Xamarin.Forms wasn't so good for UWP. Then what you can do is to use MvvmCross and apply the solution for Xamarin.Forms on Android and iOS, but go native on UWP, still using the same core layer, okay? So there's very, very high potential on it, and it kind of makes the development process riskless. So there's no risk on using Xamarin.Forms because you can just switch to any other platform later without needing to change any piece of code of the shared part, the shared code. So the features MvvmCross provides you with are view model first navigation, which means you navigate on the app between view models. You don't say first view go to second view, but you say first view model, let's go now to second view model, okay? Then it provides you with data binding, commands, converters, combiners, everything related to it. There's also an IOC container, dependency injection engine, which is there for you. There are platform-specific widgets. What I'll speak about that later. Let's just do that. And there are unit test helpers in case you're using unit tests, because that's actually a pretty good practice. Then MvvmCross provides you with unit helpers for using the IOC container and the dependency injection engine and everything related to that in your unit tests. And the last but not least is plugins. There's a whole infrastructure on the framework that allows you to make plugins for it, and there are over 100, I think, on NuGet that you can just install, that they were made by third-party contributors. And complete flexibility. There's nothing you're obligated to use when using MvvmCross. 100% of the framework is flexible, and if it's not, then please raise an issue and we will fix that, because it's our main goal right now. So let's talk about view models. Are we fine so far? Is it okay? Yeah? Okay. So view models implement unmodified property change, which means every property at a view model level has the opportunity to raise changes to the view. It doesn't happen automatically, but it's there for you. It's already made. And view models have a life cycle, and this is where it becomes more interesting. So the first thing that happens after the construction of a view model is the prepare method. That's where you can pass some objects between view models when you're navigating between them. So you can say first view model dot navigate second view model, and you can pass any object to that initialization. Okay? And then there's initialize. As you can see, it returns a task. So editing initialization for free done right. There's no need to override a method and say public async void my method. No, it's as clean as it sounds. There's a method that returns a task, and you can use it for async initialization on a view model, which happens quite common. If you're showing a list, for example, and that list needs to display some data coming from a web service, then you need to load it when the view model loads. And well, we have you covered with that. Then there are a few callbacks for views, which is the view has appeared, is appearing, has appeared, is disappearing, has it appeared, is destroyed. And there are two more, which is save state bundle and reload state from bundle. These two, this is a little bit more advanced, but platforms like Android or UWP, they have a tombstoning process. So when the operating system realizes it's getting short on memory, then it starts killing your activities, your views. So we have a callback at the view model level that allows you to save the state of your view model and to reload it later when the user comes back to the application and everything needs to come back to memory. So this is how navigation looks like. This part is the share code. So are you familiar with Visual Studio solutions, projects? Do you understand when I'm talking about share code? Just in case, I'm talking about the share code. It's for a net standard library, or in the past it was a how was it called? A PCL. So this is a share code, and in the share code is where you should put all your view models. So here we have a first view model and a second view model. Then you would say first view model navigate, and you would navigate to the second. But if you think a little bit more, there's a missing piece here because these are view models, and we want to present views to the user, not really view models. And if you think about it, then we are talking about share-code, but if we need to present views, then we need SDK code and not the share part, okay? So, suppose you want to display a view as a modal on Android, but you want it to be displayed as a tab on iOS, or you want it to be displayed, I don't know, like as a fragment maybe on Android, but as a whole new screen on a new window, on macOS. Then this is resolved at platform level. And this is how it goes. When you say navigate, then the framework will invoke a very specialized object called ViewPresenter. There are ViewPresenters per each platform, and this ViewPresenter object is responsible for deciding how a view should be shown to the user. How should it be presented? So, this is how, I'll speak about that just in a minute. So, in MvvmCross, all the navigation code remains shared, which means you don't use sequence, you don't use fragment transactions, you don't use anything like that to make navigation. It just happens behind the curtains, okay? All you have, and this is important because suppose you need to have some logic. If this happens, then navigate to this one. But if these other things happen, then I would like the user to see that one screen, that screen. And it's important that it happens on the shared code because otherwise Xamarin applications can become a real mess. I don't know if you had that experience, but it's risky. It's risky. So as I mentioned before, there's a ViewPresenter for each platform, and the way this ViewPresenter knows how to present second view model, for example, is through attributes. So you're requested to put an attribute over your view class, and that attribute will be grabbed by the ViewPresenter and will be used to decide how that view should be shown. Other than that, there's also behavior which is managed by the ViewPresenter. So suppose you have an Android application, okay, Android and iOS, and you want to log the user out of your app. Then what you can do, depends of course, but what you can do is to just show a new screen and clear the backstack. So get rid of all the screens that the user has seen before. So that's behavior. That's not about navigating forward. That's not about going from first view model to the second one. It's about clearing a backstack, which is something that also has to do with views. So in order to do that, you can use presentation hints. The way they work is from the very same point where you say navigate, you can say change presentation. And when you say change presentation, then you are requested to pass a presentation hint object. And this object will be grabbed by the ViewPresenter and it will do as you requested. So, of course, everything on it is 100% customizable. If you don't like any piece of MvvmCross code, but you're still using it, I don't know why would you do that, but you can just override an interface and a new implementation and override the IOC container registration. Okay? So this is how a view model would normally look like. We have here root view model, which inherits from MVX view model, and we're injecting the navigation service, the IMVX navigation service, which is responsible for performing every kind of navigation. And here we have a private method that, of course, returns an async task. So what you will do is say navigation service.navigate, and here we have modal vmodel. So we want to navigate forwards in modal vmodel. But if you look at this, there's the await keyword. So yes, all the navigation service methods on the navigation service actually, well, they are async friendly. So you can navigate and wait for that navigation to happen. Then at the view level, suppose we are using Xamarin.Forms, then we will have root page, which inherits from MVX content page, and modal page, which inherits also from MVX content page. There are the view model implementations that are defined as constraints, and you will say MVX content page presentation on the root page because it's just a normal content page, but we want it to be wrapped on a navigation page. So the way it will look like is like a page, a content page, but it will have a navigation bar over it. And then on modal page, we will just say MVX modal presentation. So when the navigation we saw before happens, Xamarin.Forms will display modal view over it as modal page as a pop-up. That's it. So let's see a bit more about this on an app that I have here prepared. Yeah. So let me know if you don't see very well because I know about the resolution, but I can just zoom in. So this app is called Star Wars Sample, and it's an app, of course, for Star Wars, and we will see it in a minute, but it's the app that Darth Vader would use to destroy people and planets because it's a 21st century, and yeah, it's a more convenient way, right, to do it on a mobile app. So here's the share code. It's the core part. There's an Android project and an iOS project. In the core part, here we have all of the view models, and then in the Droid part, for example, here we have all the views. And if we close it and open the iOS one, here it goes the same, views, and here they are. Okay, so yeah, let's just see it in action. This is the app. Oops. Yeah. So this is the app. This is how it looks like, and I want you to pay some attention to this view tab, which is, in the case of iOS, a normal tab, okay? But we will see on Android that the same page is a sidebar. And I need you to believe me that this page and this page, they share the view model, 100% of it, and it's just a platform differentiation for how that view should be presented. So just for the sake of fun, let's destroy a planet. So Naboo, because why not? So let's say destroy, and there it goes. Yay! Okay, it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Well, so this is the app, and what I want you to look at is that this part. Here we have some commands. This is the menu view model, and these commands, they just perform some navigations. So for instance, show planets command, it navigates forward to planet's view model, okay? But I want you to see how many methods does the navigation service have. Here we have some callbacks like after navigate, after close, because you can even close view models from here. You can say, can you navigate towards that page? Yes or no. Here it goes the same. Here's the change presentation method I told you about in a minute ago. And there's navigate, which is of course the main method of it. And as you can see, it has 19 overloads. So it's very, very flexible. You can even use, you can even pass a string, which can be an URI, and MvvmCross will decide internally to what view model should it navigate. You can even pass an existing implementation, like if a view model is already alive and you want it to display again, then you can pass it there, and many, many more. You can pass, of course, parameters, but there are two kinds of parameters. parameters for view models, and parameters for views. So it's very, very complicated, but it's easy to get started on it with it because it just works if it's simple. So let's go back for now. And let's talk about okay. So data binding. Well, you can declare your. Everyone is used it or knows what I'm talking about when I'm saying data binding? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So you can declare your bindings on C#, on XML files, on Android XML files, and on XAML. All of these files are supported. There are value converters, value combiners. There are many, many ways to declare that those bindings. For instance, there's many modes. Like one way, suppose it's a form and you only care about changes on the view side, like an input. Then you can use this mode. Then there's one way to source, which is the opposite as before, and one time, which is very useful for labels. There are multiple syntaxes that you can use for your bindings, and there's support for your own custom bindings. It's really, really straightforward. There is even documentation for that, so it's really scalable. So this is what bindings look like. Tilde is the syntax name we use for bindings on XAML and XML files. So you will say on Android, suppose local MVX bind text my text property. So text should be a property on the view, and my text property should be a property on the view model. That's easy. Then if you have a button, for instance, it will be click my awesome command. The funny thing here is that this click or this text is not actually just a property on the view, but if you create your own custom bindings, then you can say, you can name this whatever you want. You can say Nico and a property, and it should trigger your custom binding, which can have any kind of logic. It can be really, really scalable. And this is a more complex one, which is for a checkbox, suppose Android. So there's a check property, which is a bool. There's prop, which is a property on the view model, and there's inverse, which is a converter. Then we say we want the binding to be two-way, and in case prop is not found for any reason, then we want it to be false by default. That's the fallback value. Let's look at it on XAML, which is used on Xamarin.Forms. Well, it's almost the same, mvxvi.md, and then it goes exactly the same. I won't repeat it, but it's pretty much the same. And the last one is about Fluent. Fluent is normally used on Apple platforms like iOS, like tvOS or macOS, and this is because seed files or storyboards are really, really hard to understand for humans. So yeah, we can just make a binding syntax for C#, right? So this is how it goes. You start by creating a binding set, which is, yeah, we'll see that later, and then you say bind my label, which is a label for text, to VM my property. So it's really easy to understand. For is a property of text is a property of label, and my property is a property on the view model. But take a look at this one. Here we have a button, and we are binding it to a command on the view model. But there's no for instruction on it, and that's because MvvmCross has default bindings for all views. So we have applied heuristics. Well, 90% of the times you are binding a button, for example, you want to bind a click event. So let's just make it the default. And actually the same happens for labels and text. 90% of the times, you just want to bind the text. So if we do something like this, it will still work. it will display the text as binding. And this is the same binding we saw before, but on a fluent syntax. So there's set bind might switch because iOS doesn't have checkboxes. For on, which is a Boolean property, to prop, which is our property in the view model, and here is the conversion for the converter and the fallback value. It's the same using a different syntax. Okay, let's jump onto IOC container and DI. So first of all, it's optional. Well, this is because there are many people who doesn't really like IOC or DI, and they have the reasons. That's okay. So that's why, although it's used internally, you don't need to use it on your app. You can use it through service location. There's an MVX class, which is king, and otherwise you can just use dependency injection, which can be done through construction or property injection. You can register your own stuff as singletons, dynamics, you can use open generics, and you can use child containers even if you want to. It's really, really nice. And there's, of course, bulk registration because no one wants to write that much code. But, of course, when you're doing bulk registration, which we will see on the demo, well, it comes with some delays because of reflection. Of course, it's always like that. It's not that bad, but you have to know it. And suppose you're doing an app, but you want to use AutoFact or Ninject or any other IOC container because you're just used to it. Well, no problem. You can just use it. You can even make the internals of MvvmCross use it by just overriding an interface. It's not really complex. So this is a graph made by Adam Pedley, which is Microsoft MVP. And here is MvvmCross located. As you can see, it does it very well. And if you think a bit more, then there shouldn't be many reasons to use something like AutoFact or Unity in case you're using it. MvvmCross does just fine, as well as other frameworks, of course. They do as fine as MvvmCross. So let's just see only a second about this on the app. So here is this class, which is called app. It's the main entrance of MvvmCross at the shared code level. And here we are doing some bulk registration for everything code which ends with service and everything which ends with client. So here it says, hey, assembly, look for the creatable types, then look for those who end with client or with service, throw away everything that is an interface, and as last step, please register them as lazy singletons. And this is the MVX class I told you about. We will see what it has, and it's a lot. So you can subscribe for callbacks when something is registered. You can IOC construct anything, like grabbing something from the IOC container, and you can lazy create anything or register things, and of course resolve and try resolve. So it's like everything you should expect about an IOC implementation to be. Or at least I hope so, of course. So, are we okay? Please let me know if I'm going too fast or maybe if I'm distracting you or going to just too slow. Okay? Are we fine?
You're doing great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So, platform specifics. So far we have discussed about things which are shared, which are for all apps, all platforms. But now, there is one platform which is hated by the most and liked by many, and it's Android because, well, it makes everything difficult for developers. But there are Android support packages which are there to save us not so much time. Well, MvvmCross has some helper packages to use them. Other than that, there are, well, polymorphic lists. They are made easy, and if you have developed an Android app have you used adapters maybe for recycler views or for list views, and they are awful. They are very repeated code that you need to write every time you want to create a list. So well, you can say just goodbye to them, because MvvmCross provides you with some helpers and an adapter which is ready to use and which will make your life so much easier. And the same goes for Android on table views, on collection views, and the same goes for Xamarin.Forms, for example. So if your app uses background services, if it uses push notifications, then well, there are already ways to start the framework from background, for example, to use the IOC things, or to use background services which can access your shared part using MvvmCross, using the IOC, using everything which comes with it. There's a side menu for iOS that we officially support, and well, there are many plugins, and we will see that in a second. So plugins, when I say plugin, I guess most of you understand what I'm saying, but just in case, it's a small piece of code which is there to resolve, which is meant and built to resolve a very particular case, a very particular problem. So a plugin would be something, like manages the accelerometer of the mobile phone. There's a plugin for visibility, which is there to help you with data binding and toggling visibilities for the widgets. There's a plugin for JSON serialization, color localization, a messenger hub for subscriber and observer patterns. And there's a plugin for email, SMS, phone calls, everything. The way you use them is just install from Nugget, write the code you need, run. That's it. In the past, I need to admit it was harder because you needed to add a bootstrap file to your solution, but that's past. That's yeah. We don't want to go back to that. We don't. Well, there's a lot of third-party plugins. There are plugins for settings, for the app settings, plugins for device info, plugins for sound, vibration, many more. So yeah, let's just do a small demo about using a plugin. And in order to do that, I'll install a plugin which is for making a phone call, and let's look it. Yeah. Okay, there it is. This solution uses the 6.00. Let's say add package. Okay, so it's installed, and what I'll do, just for the sake of this example, is to comment this command out and to rewrite it. So here I'll say new MVX command, and here I'll say do phone call. I'll add the method. And here, once again, for the sake of this example, I'll just use the IOC service locator and say resolve. And here I'll need to copy this class name because I won't ever remember it, which is MVX phone call task. Here will be resolved, and we will say make phone call. Here I say Berlin, and here I just put a number in it, and let's wait for it to compile, and let's run that command. Let's put a breakpoint on it. So Something else I can show you in the meantime is this class, which is called setup, and it exists at the platform level. So if you have 3 platforms, then you should have 3 setups because it goes on the SDK project, okay? Nowadays, it isn't really necessary to use it because when you're starting a new app with MvvmCross 6, you can use the default setup and you don't even need that class. So in case you do, because we still recommend people to write their own logic and their own initialization services on it, then, well, you just need to extend the provided platform setup. And here you have quite a bunch of methods that you can override. If I can show you this. Oh. Okay, it doesn't have, yeah, here it is. Yeah, so take a look at how many methods there are for you to customize. All of them are virtual, and for example, if you want to provide your own value converters, then you just there it is. So if you're using your own value converters, which you may, then you can say on this method which assemblies are the ones that contain them, because normally MvvmCross will look for value converters on the core assembly, on the core project. But if you have another project which contains those commands, because you're sharing it with any other app, then you should override this method and fill the registry with your own assembly. The same goes if you want to use, for example, a custom ViewPresenter, because you don't want the one MVVM provides, then you just can override this method, change the one that uses, and that's it. This is the main entrance of flexibility on the framework. So coming back to the example, here it is our app. Here is the menu. If you recall, we were editing the menu view model, and if everything is fine, then if I tap on show status, which is statistics, then it should stop on this breakpoint. There it is, and it should open the phone call app. Yeah, there it is. Just easy as that is how you can use plugins. Okay? Now, the last part, coming back to the presentation, is about communication and, once again. And resources for MvvmCross. You may want to write these notes, otherwise I just share the presentation. But well, there's the main page of MvvmCross. We are trying to improve our documentation every day. It's the hardest part for an open source framework, for an open source project, but well, it's necessary. Otherwise, there's just the code base. There's a Slack channel you might want to join because all the team is there, and we normally respond and answer every question that people normally has. There's Stack Overflow, Xamarin.Forms, Twitter, and the last part is about using it. So if you start using the framework, I will be very, very happy, of course, but I would like to ask you to blog about it if you do, to contribute on GitHub. You don't need to make pull requests, but just say, hey, guys, you did this wrong. Just saying that, just feeling an issue, it's a very, very nice contribution, and that's normally how everyone starts. And of course, if you don't have the time to make any contribution on GitHub, then you may consider contributing on Open Collective, which is a platform for funding open source projects and open source frameworks. So that's everything from my side. I would like to know if you have any question. Yes.
Okay, questions. First, thank you very much for the presentation, and it was really informative. So, I think as a viewer, I would like to have more information in the platform specifics that you mentioned. For example, helpers and methods that facilitate problems that arise when you use platform specific code, and maybe also a little bit more in depth about the plugins and how easy it is to write your own plugin to do the plumbing with other libraries like Xamarin.Forms plugins or your own plugin. And these two topics would be very interesting to have with deeper information inside.
Yes.
And some examples.
Yeah. So regarding platform specifics, well, there are too many entrances of MvvmCross that facilitate the development. The first one is about ready-to-use widgets like an MVX recycler view I mentioned before. But other than that, there is, for example, on Android, an MVX linear layout, which is for displaying in a linear way many rows, like if it were a table or a list, but just being a normal linear layout. So there are some widgets like that. In case of iOS, for example, there are many helpers for table views and collection views, like an MVX table view source, which can be used to. The table view source is the analogous object for the adapter in the case of lists, and well, it's there to help you with custom cells. So suppose you are building a list and it's polymorphic, or even if it isn't, but suppose it uses dynamic heights or whatever, then most of the methods used for it are already, that you need to write, are already written for you, and you can just bind the item source object of the table, of that table source, and well, the list is done. So it's very, very straightforward. The second part of platform specifics is about bindings. So there are many already provided bindings, as I mentioned before, like, or even plugins like for setting colors or for token visibilities. But you can add platform specific through bindings. And I show you something about that on this app that we were looking at. Okay. So in the case of iOS, here is a custom binding, and this is all the code that is written for it. As you can see, it's not much. It's definitely not much. What this custom binding does is to toggle the spinning wheel that shows up normally on iOS on the status bar. Do you know which one am I talking about? It's so this is the iOS app, and normally there's a spinning wheel there for loading information. And what this target binding does is to toggle it on this method using UI application, share application, network activity indicator, visible, true or false. So through this kind of bindings, you can extend your views in very different and crazy ways, because what you are actually doing is attaching a property from the view model to a custom binding, not a property, to a custom binding on the view. So from here, you have access to the property on the view model and to the widget of the view. So you can, through these bindings, you can change everything or whatever you need on the widget on the view through data binding, through these custom bindings. Here what it does is, well, in this particular binding, the target type, so the widget we are attaching this binding to, is a view controller. So there's actually so many things to do on just this binding because you have access to the whole view controller from it. So you can change whatever you need. And moving forward with it, in the case of Android once again, and I mainly mention Android when I say about widgets, it's because Android is a mess, as I said previously. So you can create, well, I think here there is a custom binding too. Yes. And this custom binding in the case of Android is to toggle the spinning wheel that appears on lists. I show you this one. Okay, it's a new one, but in the meantime, also some parts that, well, it's that spinning wheel. There it is. So that's toggled through this binding. Other thing that I already mentioned, but it's part of platform specifics, is background services helpers and push notification helpers. So what normally happens is that you have a background service and you need to access a service layer and a repository layer, and all of those are really attached to the IOC container because you have used it in every place in your app and you need it, so that's ready for you too. Is that okay, or should I try to find out some more examples?
It's a very nice example that you picked up.
Okay.
It would be good if you zoom a little bit more for the audience
Oh,
that is more
yes.
distant.
Yeah, I apologize for that. That's true. Yes.
And definitely we can find the sample also online and see a lot of examples of how to use MvvmCross. Maybe you have, you know, if there are some tools about observables in iOS. There is some values changing. For example, if you have a camera, then you can might be different values that will be changing for different reasons, and you would like to bind them. Then are there any helpers that make this planting easier to bind it on the view model?
Like in the observing way that Apple understands, like with observers from the iOS SDK. Not really. Yeah, not really. So, but what you can do is to create a binding, for example, to observe something, to create a binding, and to make the binding mode one way. So each time the view or the value is observed, then you can fire some changes to the view model. That's what I do. And regarding the second question is about plugins. So creating a plugin nowadays is as easy as creating a portable library, which should be a standard library, writing some code on it, which would be normally an interface or whatever, and then writing platform code for each platform that you want to target. You can even use multi-targeting nowadays for that. And all you need to do is to place an attribute, which is MVX plugin, over the class, and that's it. When you are working with your app, all you need to do is to add that assembly on the setup when I'm not really sure where, and I don't even think it's necessary. No, it's not necessary because yeah, it was because it is very new. But yeah, you can just decor your view class, your plugin class with an attribute which is MVX plugin, and that's it. You can just use it through IOC and everything. Yeah, there's one more thing. It doesn't just need to have the attribute, but it needs to inherit a class, which is MVX plugin, and you need to override the method, which is about setting up that plugin to the IOC, because you want to use IOC later. Otherwise, it doesn't make so much sense to do an MVX plugin, to be honest. But yeah, that's it. What I would do, I'm not sure I would do a plugin if I'm using it just for one app. It makes more sense to do a plugin when you want to consume that, but not to see the source code, or maybe you want just to have it really detached from apps. But otherwise, yeah, it doesn't make so much sense to create your own. I mean,
Okay. Definitely, it's an open source project, and everything is there for you. But I guess you have, if you have a specific plugin, then you have samples of how to do the plumbing connected with MvvmCross that
yes.
somebody can take and use.
Yes, there's documentation for creating your plugins. There's definitely a bunch of steps ready made for you for creating one. But other than that, well, there's the plugins repository, and you can see how the official ones are written, how they are maintained, and how is the plugin done.
Well, one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned at the beginning, if we know the logo,
yes.
And at the end you show us so many ways that people can communicate, blog, Twitter, and I think one strong point of MvvmCross is the social part, that you can find samples and guides for a lot of stuff that developers want to do. That's why also you're promoting this as well. What are also other strong parts for somebody to decide to use this framework in his development, in comparing to other libraries out there like Prism and so on? What is, from your point of view, the main things that somebody should choose this framework to do the MVVM part and navigation?
Yeah, well, that's a difficult one.
It's a very difficult question. I'm very sorry.
Because I don't want to be hit by any other person. Yes, but
where do you put the focus in development of this library in the next time, and what do you think are the main points that we should choose these for our development?
Yes. So, well, in the past, when someone really was just a baby, then if you didn't use MvvmCross, then you were a step behind the community, because it was a massive framework that day. For Xamarin, the Xamarin community was very, very small, but it was kind of the only choice. Okay, so it just made sense to use it. After that, quite many frameworks came out, and some others were ported, like MVVM Lite, Prism, and so many more. And nowadays it's more complicated, and there's more of a competition for users. But for me, it was to get started with MvvmCross and my company and everything. It was because of how stable it is, and how complex it is, and how many helpers it provides you with in comparison to other frameworks. Like MVVM Lite, for example, it does a great job. It's really nice, but it's light, and it's a matter of a choice whether you want it to use a framework which is light and do everything or more things by yourself, or you want to use a full framework like MvvmCross. Then with Prism, the comparison is more complicated, but well, I just think that the ViewPresenter mechanism that MvvmCross has is super complex, and that's what convinced me of using it. It's like it's really easy and time saver to work with fragments on Android, to work with any kind of presentation type on iOS, and to do the same on any other platforms. There's a navigation service on both, but I think the way the MvvmCross mechanism works. I just like it. And that's all my opinion, of course. It's not the truth or anything. That's just me.
I had a similar question, but the other way around. Do you
Yeah.
think there is use cases where you wouldn't use MvvmCross because it's like a special kind of app or something where you say, okay, maybe you will have troubles or you will have a hard time using it?
Well, I think using a framework such as MvvmCross, it just provides you with a way to do things. And that's probably the most important about using a framework which is not developed by you. But the kind of app I wouldn't use MvvmCross for is very, very simple apps. For example, a panic button. I wouldn't use it because, well, any library that you use, like any library, just add some startup delays. That is, of course, not big, but if it is a panic button, then it just doesn't make any sense. So if your app is very, very compromised with performance, then I shouldn't use MvvmCross, but any other. It's like, yeah, you can choose between Prism or MvvmCross or whatever, but if it's all about performance, for example, yeah, you have to be very careful about that.
For example, about issues that you have that have been solved, and that I guess anybody can go to GitHub and have a look at how long it takes for bugs to be solved and get out. I'm sorry for these generic questions. It's just to open a discussion more and not to get an answer yes or no.
So about issues.
For example, that issues that are still open, or the contributors, or what. That would be also interesting to have a look and see how vivid
definitely.
Present is.
So in terms of size, well, Xamarin community is not that big, as well, you might already know that. But MvvmCross has over 200 contributors so far, over 250, which is quite a lot. And it has over 7,000 commits, which is also a lot. And nowadays, we are 6 maintainers, I think, 6 or 7. And that's quite a lot as well. And it's not that, well, there are companies behind it, but there's one maintainer from Australia who has a startup and he uses MvvmCross in all his solutions. There's my company, we are also a startup, we are 11 people, but well, we use it and we support it. And there's even one company in the Netherlands, which is made by Martijn. I think you know him because of the Xamarin community. He's nowadays the lead maintainer, and he also has a company. So there are many forces behind it and supporting it. Other than that, the release cycle we have is as fast as possible always. So normally it takes 1 to 2 months to have a new version. Sometimes minor, sometimes major revision. MvvmCross 6 came out like 1 month and a half ago, not so far. And regarding issues, well, there's normally a range that goes from 80 to 180, suppose. Well, we tried, of course, to keep that amount of issues reduced and keep it always reducing. But reality is it's open source, so the idea is that everyone contributes, and the way it works, not on MvvmCross but on every open source project, is that, well, if you come and you open an issue, well, if it's quite critical, it will be resolved as fast as possible. But if it's only targeted by you and none of the maintainers is hitting it, you are not willing to maybe to open a pull request, well, it may take longer. That's just how open source works, right? It's just about MvvmCross. But I should say, if you are, for example, on the Slack channel of Xamarin, and you say, hey guys, I have this issue and I can't really move forward if this doesn't get solved, then if you are willing to open a pull request, I'm quite sure there will be more than one person happy to get you used to the code base and to help you resolve it. It's how just open source works, and it's not just about MvvmCross, but any other framework. Yes?
I think MvvmCross is not a framework to start developing for Xamarin because it's too big. You said it, it's a full framework, and yeah, it's really big. And if you're coming from WPF or so, and you're still have used Prism or MVVM Lite, then you can move with the same code and with the same knowledge. Maybe you can switch later to that. On the other point, it's Prism is there's only Brian Lagunas. On MVVM Lite is Laurent Mion, only one maintainer, and I think you said MvvmCross, there are a lot of people working on it, so maybe it's the second step.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question because I think many people refuse to use such a framework because it's too big and it doesn't make so much sense to them to start that big, because your app is a hello world app, but it already has such a big library behind it. Okay, so yeah, I understand what you say, but I think still, if that's the case, and you know your app will become bigger, then it's easier and maybe it's cleaner to start with the framework, not just with MvvmCross. It can be any other one, but I think it's important because it provides you with a way to do things that is production ready. So if the framework recommends you to do things this or that way, then you won't miss any advantage of using it, and your app will succeed. Otherwise, if you start doing everything on your own and your apps becomes complex enough, it might reach a point where it becomes difficult to change everything, and yeah, it becomes a technical debt. Maybe not, of course, but my point is, if you use a framework like that, the risk is much less.
And what about issues about performance? If you have a big framework, maybe it's a little bit slower than if you are using not so big frameworks or no framework or no framework. Okay, but maybe I'm using still Prism because I'm a WPF developer and I switched to Xamarin and that's it. And so I never did something with MvvmCross, but if you always have performance issues with Xamarin. So even we have seen it starting the application sometimes is slow. So are there also some tips and tricks, best practices how to develop an application with MvvmCross?
Yes. So this app that we are looking at, of course, it's just the simulator and everything. But on an app that I myself work on, for example, the MvvmCross initialization, it takes, I think it was 7. Yeah, I don't want to give a false number, but it wasn't that much. And the thing is, you can really optimize that by removing all usages of reflection at start time. So MvvmCross by default will use reflection. By 90% of the apps, it makes sense. There's no reason not to use it. But if performance is a problem, it's becoming a problem, then yeah, there are ways to optimize that and to take the startup maybe to the half of the time it takes normally. Of course, the MvvmCross initialization. Yeah. So, what was, because that was one part, but you mentioned another question, didn't you? Oh, it was okay?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you one thing. I think
Sure.
it's very nice, the overview. I think it looks like MvvmCross is very similar in features with Prism.
Yes.
And when a company has to decide, knows that I have to develop a more complicated application, then I maybe have to use one of the two because they will offer me more flexibility in the future to extend it. Then it will be interesting for people that they try to make a decision to see what are the strong parts using MvvmCross and what are the strong reasons to decide for Prism. And I think that would be also interesting as an addition in presentation, which was not the main part of presentation today. Of course, maybe in another presentation.
Yeah, but it's a bit tricky because I couldn't ever say any mean words about Prism, and the same goes for the other team. I think it's a competition between users, but I don't think yeah, that would be healthy for the community, for instance. Otherwise, it should be agreed. So Brian Lagunas should sit with us and we should discuss that. But otherwise, yeah, I don't want to hurt him, and he of course won't want to hurt us. And saying it's difficult.
I mean, there are examples, for example, I don't know how Yoke is supported in MvvmCross, but I know that, for example, in Prism, you cannot use any Yoke container. You're limited to specific, especially with the newer versions. Is there more flexibility there, or maybe about support of Xamarin.Forms 3? I think I don't know exactly, but I think in Prism they coming a little bit later when a new release is Xamarin.Forms with update, isn't it?
Yeah,
so there are some. It would be interesting to have some examples of differences that they are more clear, and maybe not a comparison, but also some clear difference between the frameworks.
Yeah, well, the reality is, I think none of the MvvmCross members are that used with Prism, and the Prism members are not that used with MvvmCross. So maybe it would be nice if a user would do that, if a user that has used both of them, but I wouldn't feel confident to write a review about Prism, for example. But yeah, regarding being up to date with Xamarin.Forms, with all platforms, it's difficult, and we already see that on Xamarin itself. They try to release on the same day that iOS and Android release the new versions, but there are always and nearly always problems with the IDEs, with the tooling and everything, because it's just too complex, it's just too difficult not to work with that team like together and to bring the same result or the same platform on the same day. So it's tricky. What I can say about MvvmCross is that we were already waiting for Xamarin.Forms 3 to come out. So version 6.1, it's just delayed because the Xamarin platform itself is not so stable right now for multi-targeting projects, but it should be out in some days and it has support for it already.
At least one argument for MvvmCross is there are a lot of maintainers. What about if Lagunas move away or don't want to develop it further, then it's dead?
Then they're in Berlin.
But you still have the source code, right?
Yeah, you have the source code, but okay, it's also moved on. There, before it was a prison practices team, and then Brian took it over. But at least I think if you're a company and you want to have it maintained, and the person is away. So like with MVvm Lite, I think the project is dead. Okay, Laurent is still there, but I think there's only maintenance, but no step further.
Right.
So I think the company, you have to think further. To say, okay, we take a big framework with a lot of maintainer, and which is not dead. Tomorrow maybe. So
yeah, but it's always hard. It's a hard topic because well, open source people is not angry, but they are not really happy about that situation, because how can it be that a big company is relying on just a single guy who works for free? It's crazy, right? Isn't it?
yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting topic, I'd say. Yeah, so yeah, it's just the community, how it works.
So you have to mention again the open collect.
Yeah, of course, it's important, and I think there's a change going on right now about how companies see that, because yeah, it's honestly like that. If a guy goes away, if he doesn't work on it anymore, well, what will we do? And companies are starting to realize that. Hopefully that will change in the future, but well, I do it for the fun, so I'm fine. For now, at least.
One completely different question. How are the views and the view models are connected in MvvmCross?
Yes. So there are two ways you can connect them. The first one is the most easy. It's the easiest. And here you have it. For example, on iOS, then there's a view, and the view model is just constrained. But otherwise, if you don't want to use the strong typing, then if the view is called the same as the view model, but it doesn't have the model part, then there's a convention that will realize, okay, so here we have planet's view. Let's check if there is a planet's view model, and if there is, well, they are connected. So it's a whole process of finding out when you request a view model to appear, then there's a whole process to check to discover where that view is, because you may use, in the case of iOS, for example, storyboards or zip's or coded layouts, and you can even have different names, and yeah, there's a process on it that goes, but those are the main two ways.
Does it have to be on the platform project, or can it be in the shared project too? Because it's in your project, in your sample, it's always in the platform project, the view. But I would rather share it because I'm lazy. I want to share the view on all the platforms.
Well, in this case, that's because this is a Xamarin native project.
Yeah.
But you're not really able to share those parts. But if it were a Xamarin.Forms project, then yes, you would normally have a core layer with all the view models, the service layers, the repositories, and everything. Then you would have another shared library, which is for the SAML files or the layouts itself, and then one platform project for Android, one for iOS, which are quite empty because all the views are on that second share code. And that's the one you can just drop if you don't want to keep on working on Xamarin.Forms anymore, and use the 100% of the other one.
Can I mix this? Like, at least I know it from Prism that I can use shared views and native views. So I can mix this both.
Yes.
Is this possible? Okay.
Yes, it's possible. So suppose you have an application which is just native like this one. I could just install the Xamarin.Forms packages and do some other black magic on it. No, not really that complex, but I could just install the Xamarin.Forms packages, and I could do some plumbing. That's correct. And then I could just navigate to a content page, for example, and the same goes the other way around. I could just have a Xamarin.Forms project, and I might have to present, I don't know, like a pop-up, but using the SDK capabilities, so it would be coded on using the SDA controls instead of the Xamarin.Forms ones. And there's no limit on that. You can even attach to that native view inside of the Xamarin.Forms application. You can even attach a view model to it, and you can just display it. Something that is also cool is how view models work and how flexible they are in terms of, it's not that they really, it's one view model, and that's it. So you can have, for example, child view models, and you can even have view models that don't have views. There's no limitation on that, because you can manually create view models. So if, for example, you have a child list, like you have a child and then you have a child inside of a child, something like that, then you can reuse view models and you can just have view models without views. It's very flexible. And one thing which is that I'd like to mention, in case there's no other question, is about MvvmCross 6. It now supports Net Standard 2, and the main goal was to make the framework flexible, which is I talked to you about. So nowadays it's so much easier than in the past to start an application with MvvmCross. You just need to install the packages, to change the inheritance of a class, which is normally the app delegate on iOS, or the app class on Xamarin.Forms, or a main activity on Android. You just need to change an inheritance to override one or two methods to create an app class on the share code, and that's it. That's all you need. Wasn't like that in the past, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so I think that was everything from my side. I would like to thank you very, very much for having me and for listening to me for so much time. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this great presentation. Yeah, I looked at it at the MvvmCross a couple of times, but never that much in like maths, so that was pretty weird. You're all invited to stay. There is like small snacks. There's bread. There's cheese. There's like if you're hungry, stay around, grab a beer, grab a water, grab a mountain, and let's discuss further about Xamarin or other topics. Just feel like at home.
Also, if you have to head home already, which hopefully you can stay, but don't forget to take one of your goodies. We have some bags, and there's something's inside. I don't know. There's a surprise inside.
It's a surprise bag.
It's even a surprise for myself.
I'm very happy that the project has young maintainers. The younger than me, then at least I can use this library as long as I stay. So, sort of a plan.